did I start writing for children is because so a couple of things happened. One is I got hugely interested in this entire format of books, that was the picture books, which is thanks to my having started reading out to my children when they were very, very young. So like I started with my child when he was 3 months old, and this I'm talking about 20 years ago. It's like, and at that time I wasn't even aware that there were picture books in India, as in by Indian authors and by Indian publishers and all that. I wasn't aware of that because I was not a part of the publishing industry at all in that sense. So whatever books I could pick up for my child from the market, and the market had, I mean, so this I'm talking about Bombay, and the Strand Book Fair, they used to have an annual book fair sort of thing every year. Gosh, annual is book fair, annual every year. And that's where I would go and pick up huge numbers of books for my child, and they were mostly international titles. And I guess that was my first exposure to the picture books in the contemporary sense, because I was used to reading a lot of books when I was young, and those were mostly illustrated books, the Russian ones, like really those gorgeously illustrated ones. But this format of picture books was a little different from that, because those used to be text heavy. And those were largely illustrative, the artwork used to be that. But in this case, these were like picture books the way we know them now, especially in India. Okay, so I think I got hugely attracted to the entire medium. Because, the entire craft of telling a story in 32 pages and in about 400 to 500 words, I would find it a huge... as a writer, because I've been a freelance writer for like forever. So for me, that brevity was what was the most challenging thing in that, and it was also the most attractive thing that I found. So in my mind, I think I started telling myself that yes, I can do it, because I would earlier sort of tend to write in a very expansive sort of manner. And it was because of my exposure to picture books, and some really great ones, that I felt that, okay, there can be stories which can be said in such crisp manner so very effectively. I think it was that passion. I really became deeply passionate about the form as a reader, as someone who would, I started appreciating the medium for whatever it was. And I thought at some point that I would be able to do it myself. And that's about it. There's no great backstory to it as such. I just, at one point, I felt I was ready to write for children. And when I say writing for children, I think in my mind it was always picture books. Though my first book that came out formally was not a picture book. It was something that I edited, and I also it was for young adults. But eventually, I think after that, it's just been picture books, because that's where my heart is. I don't know. It's a very does it sound unconvincing? But that's how it was. I think in my mind the story begins from an illustration. So, and the idea sort of, so it jumps from there into a word sort of idea into my mind, in my mind itself, and it's almost so the idea, it'll keep growing and developing in my head until a point where I feel that, okay, now I'm ready to sort of put it down on paper. And it's usually on paper first. So I'll have scraps of paper here or there where I'll be scribbling it down. And typically, from the moment that idea may have come to me to the time I put it down on paper, the first draft, it can be anything between, say, a year to 7 years. Okay, so I do take a long time developing it uh, they're up there first. Uh, and once that has happened, I think putting it down on paper is not such a big problem, and then I feel it sort of just flows. But even so, between the first draft and the final one uh, that comes out in the market, there would be close to 50 and 70 revisions of that. So that revision process for me also takes another, say, a year, 2 years maybe. So it's a long, I mean, for me, it every story that goes out there, even if it's like only 500 words, it would have had a long sort of germinating sort of period. Except a couple of books where it just happened overnight. It just happened. I mean, something like Machher Jhol, I think it was sort of providential. I don't know how it was, but it just happened overnight. I mean, that was the intent. I had promised Shumanto that I will send him something very, very soon. And it took me just, I mean, it really did happen overnight. But other than that, it takes a long time for me. How do I is there any research? No, there is no research in that, because mine is mostly fiction. And fiction also where it's largely in the realm of the emotions and uh, I mean, maybe the mind and relationships and how children see the world and how their interaction with the adult spans out and all that. So I don't research. I don't think I've ever had to research for a book. But as I said, I mean, when it's brewing in my mind in a nice sort of way, yes, a lot of thoughts are coming in and out, floating in and out. And for me, it always boils down to whether I'm able to get to that emotional core of the story or not. Because if that doesn't happen, I don't tell myself that it's ready to go out yet. So at this stage, I mean, there are at least 4 stories which are almost done, 2 of which are fully done books. I mean, completed illustrations and everything is ready, written by me. And I am not willing to sort of publish them yet, because I know the story is still not done. So and the illustrations are out of this world. I mean, outstanding illustrations. But I'm not able to get that book out because I myself am not confident about the story being having reached that stage where I, as a reader, if I read that story, I feel, oh wow, something inside me moved. So I mean, that's how I let each story take its time before it goes out. Okay, that's a tricky question. So the first train of ideas that come to my mind, and maybe the first draft that I put down there, no, there wouldn't be any conscious sort of decisions coming into play. So at that stage, it'll still largely be about a character with whom I'm able to identify with, like, very, very in a deep, strong sort of manner, and I don't look for anything beyond that at that stage, at least. To me, that character has to be as authentic as I can make it be. But after that, I think after that stage is when the entire thing about, because it's going to be a published book, at some point it does start coming into play. Things like whether I'm being completely true to the character that I'm trying to portray or not. So for instance, say again, I'll give you the example of Machher Jhol, because I remember there was a very thorough sort of check that I had to, at least at my end, I wanted to do before I felt it was okay to let it out. Because I was portraying a child who could not see. And I personally, I've had very, very little interaction with visually challenged people. I mean, my closest interaction maybe was at college, at hostel, because I would help, I mean, we had blind students coming into our thing, and we would help them with their, jotting down their answers and reading out stuff to them and all that at the university level. So that was there. But again, I mean, I was not as committed and in that endeavor as many of my other friends were. But having said that, I did do it a few times, and I knew how it felt to be sitting with a visually challenged person and the way their minds were thinking. And that's when I realized that, until then, I may not have even thought about it. But it's only then, my exposure to them at close quarters, that I realized that, I mean, they are no different from what I am, or she's no different from what I am. I mean, there's no lack of confidence. There is no unsurety about themselves. I mean, they see themselves as full, complete individuals, just the way a person who's able to see properly takes themselves to be. So I think that must have been one thought, definitely, that was at the back of my mind when the character of Gopu sort of developed, because at no stage did I want the reader to get an impression. And also it was very, very important because of the way the story panned out. The reader did not have to know that the character can't see, right? So the mannerisms, the trade, the words, the way the mind is thinking, everything had to be like just any other individual, right? So for me, that was an important thing. So I guess that was one book where some amount of research would have gone, because I remember reading up a lot in that sense to make sure that I was being true to those individuals who are not able to see the way most other people are visually, I mean, through their eyes. So that was there. But so then, yes, the universal nature of the stories, I feel I am able to depict more through the illustrations. And that's why I feel the huge part of the weightlifting of at least the titles that I have either written or edited and published and all that has been taken by the illustrators. And hats off to them, because they are the ones who are the little stars in each of those stories, because they are the ones who have infused those picture books with so much life, way beyond what my words can depict, right? So so that amount of that element comes in when I am discussing the books with the illustrators, and therefore I leave a lot of room for the illustrators to come back with that, to fill up that universal sort of universality gap that I leave in my words, and I deliberately leave that in my words. That's how it is. Universals, you see. Okay, so but the one thought that definitely plays on my mind, and this is where my role as the publisher comes in. Okay, yeah, this I think I mention, because any story that's being done, I have to look at some stage, I have to start thinking of the market for which I'm making the book. So again, I mean, I don't look at books as still in my head as sort of commercial entities. I mean, they are. I'm a publisher, I have to sell them. But even so, a lot of times I don't really think too much about who's going to pick it up, or whether it's for a 4-year-old child or a 10-year-old child, etc., or for adults. But I mean, I try to make them sort of age agnostic. But the one thought that is always there the moment I start thinking about the visuals in a formal way in terms of the books getting done is whether I want the essence to be more Indian or more international. And there's a difference in the way I approach, and therefore the illustrators I approach for any of the titles depends on where I see the book headed. I mean, again, it's not as calculative as it's sounding right now, but in my mind, yes, even before I start working on a book, I do have a sense of whether I want the book to be a predominantly for that for the Indian market, and therefore, the illustrators I'll work with will, that essence, the Indianness will come out. And I'm not saying that I'm pandering to that thing about being Indian, etc. It's not that. It's just, for instance, the new title that's come out, I remember discussing it with, when the story came to me from Mamta, I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago. Beautiful story. I mean, the way it is. So it's like, she had used Aji, I, all those terms. And at one point, I do remember thinking within first, and then also discussing it with Mamta, whether we should keep it as Aji, I, or should we make it more sort of universal is a wrong term for it in this case, more sort of globally accepted words, understood words, easily understood words, which is like grandmother or whatever, granny, mommy, and all that, because that would have determined the course that the book would take visually. So at that stage, like we decided that no, I mean that setting of the Maharashtrian family, the very, very the look of the grandmother, it'll all have to be that authentic. I mean, because when Mamta said I've based it in Nagpur, so then at some stage we decided that okay, it has to be that, and I will not make it into a neutral sort of a visual a book that comes out. So when I say neutral, it means that it can be a book which could work anywhere in the world. I mean, there are characters, so you'll find maybe if the mother is wearing or the grandmother is wearing a sari or a salwar kameez, you'll know that it's an Indian family, and yet there will be a sense that it's an artwork that works anywhere, or it could be a story set in any sort of backdrop, in any country, in any culture, and all that. So yeah, that is definitely one big decision that I have to take before the illustration work on any book starts. And that's a very calculated, I mean, calculated is the wrong term. That's a very conscious choice that I make for any title. I feel if we are leaving things at the level of how we feel, at the heart of any difficult concept is how we emotionally process that thought. Okay, so any thought is as complicated or as simple as how lightly or how, with whether it's with great difficulty or whether it's with great simplicity that we are able to process the thought. And if finally it all boils down to how that so-called difficult topic is impacting me as a person. And when I'm saying me, I'm putting myself in the shoes of the character that I'm trying to depict. And that's what I have done with my books, that I just have to place myself in the situation of a 4-year-old child, and just allow it to happen to me in that sense. And of course, there will be mistakes. I know there will be times when I may end up oversimplifying. I am aware of that, because finally I am in a way appropriating thoughts which are still not, no matter how much I try to think like a 3-4-year-old child or 5-year-old child, I can put myself there. I can try and remember myself as a 5-year-old child, but I know I will be making mistakes. But I guess that's how we learn. With each book we learn, and I'm okay with it. single book does that. Every single book. Because if the process of birthing a book in whatever capacity is a, I think it's a multi-layered sort of process, and if we allow ourselves to get moved at each of those levels, I think we are allowing ourselves to grow through that process of that bringing out that whole book. So every single book that I can think of has just left me thinking, okay, I have grown. So over the course of having in the course of the making of the book itself, I have found myself growing into into a being which I wasn't when the book started, and I think that is to me, that is what is keeping me going on and on with getting more books out, whether in the capacity of an author or a publisher, editor, whatever. But the one title that I would like to talk about, purely because it's not a title that would come to anyone's mind for a question like this, is something called Gigi and Daddy. Gigi and Daddy was Gigi and Daddy was so brilliantly illustrated by Mithila Anand. I mean, you could. Okay, I don't know. This is so difficult for me to answer. The only thing that I'm doing is bringing out stories which I feel are very authentic. That's all I'm doing. The one difference that I do feel in the Pickle Yolk titles and the bulk of the titles out there is that because there's a lot of thought that's going into each title, behind each title, the thoroughness shows. And when I'm saying thoroughness, I'm trying to bring about that sort of consciousness in the reader, as well as in suppose there's another editor somewhere sitting and looking at a Pickle Yolk title, maybe they are able to see that, okay, if we give our stories a little more time, maybe or if we give our illustrations a little more time, maybe we'll get a finer version, a more beautiful version than what we are putting out there right now. I feel that is definitely one aspect of a Pickle Yolk title which stands out in my mind. It's the time that it takes. It's the amount of time is the thing that comes to my mind, because I don't rush through the illustration process at all. I mean, there have been times when an illustrator has taken close to 2.5 years to finish a book, and I have been perfectly fine with that. So I don't rush through the illustration process. I don't set any deadlines for any book, for any title. I mean, I really feel lovely books are being brought out, beautiful books are being brought out, bold books are being brought out, which I don't think, diverse books are being brought out, which I don't think any other market in the world is as diverse and as experimentative in the way our Indian picture book industry is. I think it would go into the last. I don't know. I really don't know where it would go. But please do add this, because I feel that as a creator, in whatever capacity, I have a lot of fun creating books. I mean, the only reason why I'm publishing is because I really enjoy this whole thing of creating a book from scratch. Otherwise, I would have been happy as an author and sharing, my stories with everyone. But the reason I'm against all odds, I'm still continuing as a publisher, is because I just love this entire process of putting a book together. And for me, it's that joy factor which stands out predominantly. I mean, I've told myself the day I stop having, I stop feeling that joy in creating any book is the day when Pickle Yolk will stop creating any more books. So I think that's it. I mean, for me, the joy is the joy that that whole act of putting that book together is paramount, and I hope it shows through the titles.